Hey, there we are.
All right.
All right,
Sarah,
now I'm hanging up the phone. Are we still on?
we are on.
Woo!
We well, we'll wait for some people to come in. It's good to see them. Here with Sarah Kaufman, longtime dance critic at the Washington Post, author of The Art of Grace, which is a great book, and her new book about a subject very close to my heart, Verb Your Enthusiasm, How to Master the Art of the Verb and Transform Your Writing. Now, I was telling you earlier, this is really something I believe in deeply. But when I started reading your book, I was like freaking out because I was like, I don't think I'm practicing what I preach quite enough. And it really made me kind of reassess the way I do that. And you have that issue as well?
I have always had that issue of following my own advice. You mean? Yes. But it really helped to put it down in book form, let me tell you.
I can imagine the pressure of writing a book about verbs, and you got to check it. I mean, are you just like hyper focused on every one of your verbs?
Yeah, so and that was in the editing process. But I have to say, I started out in journalism as a copy editor. So I love the editing process. And that's what I love about teaching writing also, is working really closely with students on their work and, engaging with it and like, this is great. How can we make it a little sharper and clearer and whatever. So I did that with my own work. And that was the fun part, really, the editing, the combing through and making sure I did not have too much passive voice in there, having had a whole chapter on avoiding the passive voice most of the time, maybe not all the time. But yeah, the editing process was fun. And well, I got to say, actually, every bit of this was fun because I got to talk to so many smart people, editors I've worked with, scientists of language, neuroscientists and cognitive scientists and linguists, to find out how verbs actually work in our minds and in our bodies to stimulate us, to make us kind of imitate and reenact the movement that we're reading about on the page subliminally that we don't even realize. So verbs really have that power over us, even probably below our conscious understanding. That was kind of exciting. But also then reading great literature and great journalists and nonfiction writers to find amazing uses of verbs that really made their work so memorable. So it was all really fun.
And in some ways this is a guidebook. In some ways it's poetry. In some way it's, sort of an ode to the verb. What when you set out to do this, what did you want to accomplish, and why'd you do it in the first place?
I really felt like I had stumbled on something in my work as a dance critic, where I had to watch, musical athletes on the stage so many nights of the week, which was a tremendous thrill and privilege, but I had to capture that in words. And so I really discovered the power of verbs. I probably should have known it all along. I don't remember ever being taught it in school, but, it was more like finding the right way to describe something or to describe my own reaction. And that often involved verbs. So then I started realizing, hey, this is also what I really love about books I'm reading and passages that stick with me. And in starting to teach writing, which I've done for years, and I started really early in my career. I probably shouldn't have, had newly forming emerging writers under my guidance at that point, but someone asked me to do it. But, I found that a lot of writing issues were often verb issues, where you write yourself into a corner, you don't know how to get out, or a passage just feels flat and you're not really sure what to do about it. And oftentimes it was, hey, maybe let's turn this around and have a simple subject verb sentence. break this up into 3 sentences instead of one really long one so that the point is really clear and you make that through a nice dynamic verb. Just kind of tying all that together made me think like this is really an important part of writing and actually personal expressiveness that I wanted to share with people. So
It,
that
it's
was
really hard. I'm sorry. It's really hard for me to read this without sort of reading it through the lens of The Art of Grace and your other work. And, and it's, which for people who don't know, I mean, you kind of take the dance critic's eye and look at the world. I mean, from actors and athletes and, was it your great grandmother, if I remember, on Johnny Carson, which was a great story. But I mean, I can't help but think of the grace of writing and the grace of verbs. And I wonder, is that connected, and is that a conscious sort of thing? If so.
Well, thank you for that. First of all, John, it's really kind of you to say. I think that overall, I I guess with the experience I've had, I do have kind of a habit of looking for smoothness, clarity in whatever I see. I mean, I think a lot of us are drawn to that. I think that's just a human pull that we love things that are graceful, basically smooth enough to just thrill our sensitivities, our insides, but also with a little bit of distinctiveness and unexpected motion and unexpected thrill to make it interesting. So not blandly smooth, but kind of interestingly smooth. And so in looking at that, I mean, it also translates into what I try to write, what I love to read, grace and clarity. I talk about that in Verb Your Enthusiasm. And I think that verbs help us get there, because they can bring such beautiful images to mind. And sometimes it gets a little abstract to talk about verbs, but if I could just read you a couple sentences from here's this book I love called The Gathering by Anne Enright. She's an Irish writer. And her book is just full of the most beautiful images. And here she is in this passage where she's talking about an unnameable feeling that she has. And she says, I am gripped at the thighs, but by whatever feeling this is, a vague wind, it clutches at me, skitters between my clothes and my skin. It lifts every hair. It grazes my lip and is gone. And so, she talks about something you can't put a noun to. You can't say that feeling is fear or that feeling is discomfort. It's like that's much of life, right? We can't really label it, but the verbs and to turn it into the action of the natural world on her body and what her body feels, gripped at the thighs, clutches at me, skitters, lifts every hair, grazes my lip. The verbs really give you a sense of how that feeling works on her and just brings this world of change right onto the page. And I think that's the beauty of verbs, is that they are such expressive tools.
You talk about, I mean, you quote Eli Saslow, I guess, a couple of times, and talking about changing verbs have a way of changing your perspective, which I think there's the Boston Globe critic as well, I think, who said something very similar. It changes the way you see the world, and I think that's really what you're talking about there, right? I mean, because when you take the writer out of it and let the subjects tell the story through their own physical actions, which you have a chapter on as well. I mean, that paints that picture so much more vividly.
Exactly. And you put it perfectly. I mean, in that Eli Saslow article that I quote, when he was writing at the Washington Post, and he's since gone to the New York Times and won a couple Pulitzers like you. He really focuses on his subjects and in such clear, plain language. There's nothing fancy about his writing, but just at the sentence level, just so clear. He writes about this woman. He's in this particular example, someone who lives on food stamps and what she does to dress herself up and preserve her dignity, even while she's got to go wait in a bread line. And he talks about her reaching for a cigarette to calm her nerves, how she sprays perfume on, how she attaches her false eyelashes. And it's just talking about the actions that she takes, puts us right there in the room with her, puts us right next to her. And we see what she's doing. He doesn't comment on it, but all of the effort that she puts into pulling herself together is very clear. And that gives us such a beautiful portrait and a moving portrait of a person who we don't know otherwise. We might pass by on the street, but here we're right in the room with her.
I found that helpful and profound in a way, because I struggle a lot about how I reach too far trying to figure out how to describe someone. And I mean, there's something, some event, I mean, the great writers can just go out there and write in a way that just brings you there. And it's really hard to do. But when you think of it in the way that you're just talking about, all you're talking about doing is looking at the world and seeing the small things and putting them there in a way that advances the story. It's not magic. It's just observational.
Exactly. It's observing, as you say, and it's it's the details and the specifics that really pull a reader into the story. When you give specific details, she reaches for a cigarette, she attaches her false eyelashes, the wind is lifting every hair, not just I felt the wind, but lifting every hair. It's just like the passage from the book. It's just a way to really connect us to the storytelling. We're in the scene, we're participating in it, so we can feel it. And that's the beauty of verbs, is that they're so visceral. If we just think about verbs, and I don't advocate that we write every sentence, it lifts every hair, or grazes my lip. We don't want to flail too much and just pile action on top of action and confuse people. But if just, thinking about verbs and just every now and then where it really suits the purpose to distill something down to a simple action, a simple but precise action, can be very effective.
You mentioned earlier, and you have a chapter really devoted to active voice, and I'm fortunate that I have an editor who is who I refer to as the active voice police, which is everyone should have. That reminds you when you do that. And I will always tell her, that some rules are made to be broken sometimes, but so we make those choices. But at the same time, it's very hard to write in active voice and not utilize verbs better than if you were in passive voice. Talk about that relationship, if you agree with that.
I absolutely agree. I think that if we go over our work and notice the passages of passive voice and try to turn them around, it will, maybe 8 times out of 10 result in a better sentence. I mean, we don't want to banish the passive voice entirely, because it can be used to really good effect. I think one of the best examples is from, this is in my book, from James Joyce, the very famous, if I can find it, very famous beginning of his Ulysses, where he talks about, why can't I find it in here? Okay. Okay. Beginning of Ulysses. Buck Mulligan he introduces him. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him by the mild morning air. So, was sustained is in the passive voice, but it suits this passage because it's kind of like this mocking, as you read further, you get the sense the author is sort of gently mocking Buck Mulligan. This sense of grandeur, sort of faux grandeur, that almost like the deity himself is sustaining this dressing gown behind Buck Mulligan. So it can be used to really great literary effect, or even just be more efficient if, like, we're writing about a scientific report, and it's quicker just to say the snowfall was recorded over the past 10 years instead of scientists recorded snowfall. I mean, it's understood, or even in a police report, the suspect was arrested. I mean, we don't need to say, police arrest it, things like that where it's understood. We don't need to fuss with too much, but in general, the passive voice hides the person doing the action. So if we think about who's doing the work in this sentence, if you're in the active voice, you're making it very clear that the subject did the work. So my dog climbed Mount Everest. My dog is the one doing the work. My dog climbed Mount Everest. And if we turn it around to Mount Everest was climbed by my dog, well, the subject of the sentence is now Mount Everest, who's not doing any climbing, it's just sitting there being a mountain. My dog that did all the work is at the end of the sentence. So you see, it hides. If you say, Mount Everest was climbed, the dressing gown was sustained, mistakes were made, you're hiding the person who did the work, who did the verb.
Well, first of all, I am extremely impressed with your dog, and
yeah, I know, great dog.
And I will admit that I am one who will sacrifice any rule for the sake of rhythm. So, if it just has that rhythm that gets me to where I want to go, I'll use it. But in general, I agree with all of that. There's a question. Becca has a question. She wonders if you have thoughts about the recent Atlantic piece about the death at the age of reading. I have thoughts on that. Particularly the bit where the reporter shows how so many readers now buy books that have much, much simpler sentences than even a generation ago. Do you have thought? Did you read that?
It's a great comment. And yeah, I think that's very true. I have a book on my shelf over here I won't get up and reach for, but it came out some years ago, and it sort of brings books down to data points just like that, like numbers of bestsellers and how many, 3-syllable words they use, or how many pages they take up, or how many, what grade level they're written at. And those numbers are consistently going down and down and down. I don't know what to make of that, because, it's all a matter of the effect, I think. Do we love the literary effect of that? Do we enjoy these books? Do they stimulate our imagination? Do they feed us in some way? Do they connect us with people we would never know of? Do they knit us further into the human experience? So it's hard to say whether longer sentences or shorter sentences are having a negative effect or a positive effect. I think really it's an individual thing, but I just come down on the side of grace and clarity. And I think that can take a number of different turns. I mean, you can write about murder and mayhem in a really clear and beautiful way. I mean, John le Carre is one of my favorite authors, and yeah, he is not somebody who writes in short sentences. So he's definitely more of the longer sentence writer, but they're just very clear and beautiful. I also enjoy, the Jack Reacher stories. I mean, I think those are
I did too.
brilliant. So
I did too.
yeah,
But I'm sort of hypocritical on this. Number one, I hated that article. I hated the concept of it more than I did the actual piece, because I'm not ready to declare us post-literate. But I also, I wrote a column. I've been writing a column for what, quarter century, and when I always started doing that, I started every column I'd write. Number one, you have to write to a very specific length, but number two, I would run it through the Fleisch-Kincaid grade level analysis in Microsoft Word to get what the word was, and I was shooting for fourth grade or less because simplicity and clarity. And I'm writing to a broad audience, in an environment where the reading level's not that high. And I think that being understood is more important in trying to describe complicated things in a readable way than writing it exactly, than the opposite. So I've always been a big believer in that, and I think that you can write beautifully, and I think that you can write clearly at a pretty low grade level. And our goal as writers is to be read. So
100%. No, absolutely. Preach, brother. I agree with every single word. And I think that we really ought to be clear about that, and be clear when we are teaching writers as well. What I found when I would teach college students very often is a kind of attempt at academic writing, the lot of phrases on top of phrases and clauses within clauses. And gosh, I would say, well, you could cut half this sentence down and have a really nice, clear, short sentence. And often I would get the remark, but then I wouldn't hit the word count that you gave us. And I would say, whoa, thank you for that, because I didn't realize I didn't realize that would be the outcome. Like,
so you were asking for more words than and they were stretching it to meet your.
I guess so. Like, yeah. So my response would be, I want a beautiful essay. I want a beautifully written essay, the best essay you could possibly do. So give me that. If it falls short of the word count, I do not care. And the word count to me is kind of a guide. But I realized, and I ran that past my children who've come up through, school, high school and college. And they were like, yeah, that's why the thesaurus button exists, so that you can add adjectives and stuff. Hit the word count. And I'm like, OMG.
That's right.
Did not realize. So short and sweet. Definitely.
It's funny when I teach. I mean, I've taught some, and I always limit it to 500 words or something, because that's what I had to do, and that's what changed me. Is because when you have to choose them, every word counts, and so that's why Sam has a great comment here. As my friend says of the Kinks, Ray Davies, give him a fifth grader's vocabulary, and he'll astound you with the things he does with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, whoops. Did I do something? Oh, no.
What? You're good.
Have I messed up somehow? I seem to have lost the picture.
I see you.
Oh, are we still good? Okay. So sorry.
Can everybody see? Somebody tell me.
Okay. It's back. Sorry, I was trying to do something with the volume. We just had a trash truck go by, so my apologies.
Well, at least your trash got picked up.
Yeah.
So you do talk about defying AI in the book. Talk a little bit about that.
AI and writers is a very it's a very upsetting subject. We all know writers who've lost their jobs, respected news organizations, getting rid of people so that they can bring in AI. Even the AI babysitters are now getting fired. We're just like, it's apparently just let AI do its thing and don't even have humans reading it over. I mean, it's terrible. And I think that what we can, as writers and as readers, as human beings, turn to is our own imaginations and our human hearts that beat and that feel things in ways that an AI bot never can. An AI can't sit in the sun and feel that the way that melts into your bones, can't look at another face and uh, find answers to the deepest questions in the eyes looking back at you. I
And
mean,
the hair on the yeah. So
the hair, the lifting the hair. Yeah, you can't feel the wind lifting your hair. So I think that verbs particularly come into that because, as we've been talking about, they're so expressive and they're so efficient. You can tell a whole story in one verb. And I don't think AI has grasped that yet. The way, you could say, for example, he had a knife in his hand and looked like he was coming toward us, so we got out of there fast. You can boil that down to he grabbed a knife, we fled. You've got two strong verbs there to do the work of a whole sentence. Um, grab and flee and loom. I mean, there's so many evocative verbs that we can use to tell a whole story, to draw a reader into the world we're depicting immediately. And I think the key lies in opening up our imagination and our senses to the world around us, to see this world of action, to see it and feel it as these transitory actions, these transitory moments of change. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not necessarily talking about big change, like, you meet the person of your dreams, but small changes, the wind lifting your hair, a bird flying from tree to tree, to see those things and really reflect on, what action can I give that? I mean, it might look like fly to me, to you, it might look like soar or dive or scoop or dip. There's so many fresh ways that we can talk about the world. And that's what AI is never going to have. It's never going to have our sensibility.
Sam asks, where do we stand on verbifying nouns?
Yeah, so I love that question. I keep a little list.
Is this in your notebook that I've been so wanting to see?
Yeah, yes.
For
You
for the record, she writes in the book about I guess it's a tip as when she hears like a good verb, she writes it down for later
yeah,
use.
I'm looking at, so my list that I have here is mostly actual verbs, not necessarily verbified nouns. But I'll tell you one that yeah, this is a verbified noun. So I went into a diner. My husband and I went into a diner. It was really crowded. We were shown to a table. The server came and put out menus. And she said to us, if you need me, just hey lady me. And I loved that so much. Turned that over in my mind and wrote it down. I loved it so much because, so hey lady is kind of like a rude exclamation, but she turned it into this like warm invitation to, it was sort of a friend, it was definitely a friendly gesture and kind of witty and even a little subversive to turn a, a rude remark into a welcome, like, that's how I want you to call me out, is, "Hey, lady." And I thought that was beautiful. Um, you know, I think that to me, it's a pleasure of the English language that we can do this with nouns. We can turn nouns into verbs and verbs into nouns. Um, and we've been doing this since, words first flew out of our mouths. Some of them I'm not crazy about. I mean, this is one instance where uh, somebody in a medical situation was saying, well, we need to consent you, meaning get your consent on something. So it was like as a transitive verb, like consent you. I
That's a
just
high crime.
a high crime. It is not clear. That's the main thing. It's not clear what's going on there. So that's where I don't like them, is if they're not clear.
Right. And in moderation, like Sam says, and some
100%.
folks do get carried away with them. It's true. So tell us about your notebook and what what you do with that.
So what I have in here, here's just some examples. Well, I mentioned this to you before, to herp.
Oh, yeah.
To herp, like okay, maybe some of our viewers know what that is. Does anyone know what that
You don't
means?
know what that means to herp?
Well, I didn't know what it meant, and like I was saying to you before, it's something I would never, ever in my life do, because this is the one thing I am not, super fond of about the great outdoors. To herp means to seek out reptiles and amphibians. So I'm very cool on amphibians, lizards and hellbenders and salamanders. I really have like a monkey brain reaction to snakes. They just make me jump. And anyway, so to herp.
Well, my half of my family likes to herp. Uh, we have some herping experience, but I'm surprised, because snakes are so graceful. It would seem like that would be right up your alley.
They are, and I have been trying to get over it, because I live in the mountains. So there was the largest black snake I've ever seen in my life stretched out in our backyard one day, when I drove up the driveway, and I I looked at it with love. I found myself thinking the positive things about this large black snake. It was probably there eating voles, and we have voles in the yard that you could break your ankle in the pits they live in, the pits they create underground. So I'm intellectually, I understand snakes are great, and it's just, I don't know. I should herp more, obviously.
Well, if you herped more, I don't know if you are good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to digress into herpetology here, but if as long as are you comfortable identifying them is the question. Because if you can identify them, then it relieves the anxiety of when you see one. You can. Although I will admit that as much as I am infatuated with them, there's still a fight or flight reflex that kicks in every time I see one
Yeah,
initially.
I mean, and I know that not every snake is a copperhead or rattlesnake. I've come across them, and I know what they look like, and I've seen other snake. I think the more
The more you
it's just
know.
the way they sun themselves at you, you know? They're stretched out on the trail, and anyway, but yeah, I'm getting over it. I'm gonna work on that. That's gonna be my my job. Here's a verb, not a verbed verb, like a noun that was turned into a verb from an ad. Nordstrom Rack, the kind of off price. And then their ad, they go, there's so many reasons to rack. Well, I get it that it's an advertising use, but it's things like that that feel very gratuitously perverted for a commercial reason. It's not that elegant.
Right. And we talked earlier a little bit about, academic writing, and I mean, just so many times with academic writing, legal writing, a lot of the time, certainly corporate writing, it seems like the goal is to not be understood. And if
Oh,
I come across something in which the goal is not to be understood, then I put it down. But that may be part of the strategy as well.
well, that's where, the passive voice comes in. I've got all these examples in my book that you probably know from emails. I'm sure that our people joining this conversation have heard before. It has been brought to our attention. The situation is being monitored. An investigation has been launched. Steps are being taken. I mean, that's all used to be vague. And it's uses of, the passive voice. You can also say those kinds of things in the active voice and still intend to be vague. So just active voice doesn't get around it. But you're right. The corporate uses are often, very self-serving. I mean, not meant to convey actual information in some ways, the jargon that's used. And jargon is not in and of itself bad, to say a right sizing instead of laying people off. That's jargon, right? Right sizing. But if it's used to hide your motives or to kind of cover up mistakes that the corporation made, then you wish for a little bit more transparency for sure.
And it's interesting to me as you were saying that. I mean, there certainly are a lot of cases where people are intentionally vague, but as a writer who's not trying to be that, generally speaking, when I find myself doing the things you're talking about, which does happen, it's usually because I don't know enough, or I haven't got my brain around what I'm really trying to say. And so
And yeah,
it happens.
I've been right there with you. Absolutely. I have done that as well. And it's a good signal to, well, if you're on deadline, maybe you don't know anymore, but it is a good signal that that's what's happening.
Well, we're getting close to the point where we need to wrap this thing up, but I want you to talk about what people can do. I mean, tips for people to kind of try to be more verby. I just did it in their writing.
Well, the number one tip is to just kind of think inside yourself, realize that you have everything you need right in your own person, your senses, your ability to perceive the world, your unique discernment. You have all of that. And what I would suggest is to use that to guide you towards fresh language. If you find yourself using a phrase that you've heard before or a verb in an expected way, where maybe you want to get at something a little bit more unique to your own perception or different and distinctive, try to just think about a different way to say it, some fresher verbs. Along with that is using a thesaurus. I am 100% side thesaurus. Yeah. I often get that question, isn't it cheating? And it's not. It's feeding your brain. It's like a dictionary. So I have a number of thesaurus, maybe is what they're called. I have no idea actually what the plural is. Noun's not my thing. But use a thesaurus. Just be aware that there could be small nuances between a list of synonyms and that you're picking the right one for your purpose. And then also think about ways to expand. Like we've talked about ways to shorten writing with verbs to kind of reduce the number of words, but you can also use great verbs to expand your writing. If, for example, you're saying something like, he was afraid or he was happy, you could expand that to talk about the actions inside the person. He got the news and it made him jump up and down and feel like his insides were full of champagne bubbles, and he danced into the kitchen and whirled around the island, to give us that immediate sensation of being in that person's experience, rather than just the easy label of he felt happy. And you can do that with all kinds of emotions. And that's another way to just bring in some fresh language into what you're writing.
Yeah, and it really helps you be more precise too when you choose the right one. I mean, you talk. Some of them can, they have the nuance, and if you aren't aware of the nuance, it can be troubling, problematic. But if you are, then it really helps you say what you want to say.
I mean, verbs are how we connect with the world, how we understand the world, and they're very powerful and very expressive. A real tool of expression and imagination. And that's what's magical about them. So I am a happy evangelist for verbs.
Well, it's a divine calling. And I want to everybody, and I have to say that the blurb from Benjamin Dreyer on the top of the book says it all too. As almost shockingly adroit guide to how to make every word count, and that's high praise from a guy who knows. And wrong place. And it's I assume it's available everywhere.
It is available everywhere. And thank you for that.
And that's Art of Grace. It's don't sleep on that one either. It's a lovely book.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you joining me. And thanks everybody for coming in and for the questions. That was great. And of course, we'll save this for later so that other people can see it. But I'm so glad I'm just glad to see you. And I'm glad you came in.
Glad to see you too. It's been too long, and I really appreciate this. Just a delight to talk with you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Say hi to John for me.
I will. And hi to Alicia. Absolutely.
All right. Goodbye. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.